Welcome to the HealthspanMD podcast. So welcome to the Healthspan podcast. You know, every episode we have a special guest on the Healthspan podcast, but not every episode has Ben Lytle. Ben, true visionary. He's not only shaped the healthcare industry, but, you know, he's helping us reimagine the future. I could spend all day talking about Ben and his accomplishments, serial entrepreneur, healthcare innovator, thought leader. Many of you may know him as a former CEO of and founder of Anthem, and now Elevance Health, one of the biggest healthcare companies, Fortune 30 company, I believe. But what I've learned about Ben is that that's not even the most impressive thing about him, actually. One, we're going to do a deep dive on two books that he's written, The Potentialist, that I believe are essential reading for anybody who's interested in longevity. But I'll tell you also that Ben has proven to be even a better person than he has an accomplished person. So, Ben, welcome to the Healthspan podcast.
Well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
It's such an honor to have you here. I'll tell a quick, brief story, if I may. I know your son. We were both on the foundation board. I've known him a long time. Great reputation. I didn't know him well. But we were talking about my vision of longevity, and he says, "Oh, you need to read my dad's books." And I thought, okay, your dad, all right. Those two books, Ben, are two of the most important, impactful books that I've read in years. Can you start with The Potentialist? Like, that's the title of the books, but really it's the underlying theme of your life, your vision. Can you define what a potentialist is and how you became a potentialist at 20 years of age?
Yeah, it's a word I made up, and became my brand, not with the intention of becoming a brand. It's just the way it worked out. But when I was 20 years old, I'd had really wonderful supporting parents. A lot of people can complain about their parents, their life. Not me. I had great parents. They were short on money but long on love, and that's what mattered. Nice. But they were always very encouraging to me and my siblings, and they always said to me, you're a smart kid and you work hard. You can do anything you want to do, and that. It means a lot to a kid. Sure. But in college, I took an elective class and in the summer, and this charismatic professor, it was only probably 15 or 16 of us in the class, and he gets up, and he was probably in his 30s, and he gets up and he said, you should not try to be what anyone else wants you to be. That includes society, your parents, anybody else. Inside you lives what you're supposed to be and what you can be. And your job's to discover it and then live it. And it was like an earthquake going off. I went, wow, that's a completely different way of looking at things than I had been grown up thinking. And so he really opened the door to me then to, literally just this whole library of work around human potential and around what that means and how you develop it. And I learned very early on that living to your potential has a prize, and the prize is wisdom. And the two are very related. The wiser you get, the more you live to your potential. The more you live to your potential, the wiser you get. And so looking at the world through a lens of potential has shaped everything about me. It has shaped the way I look at myself, first of all, because you start at home. You start with trying to live to your own potential and discover it, but then also to help bring it out in the people around you, whether it's your family, whether it's starting with your family, but then also as a manager and as a leader, it's helping people discover the potential in themselves that they can't see yet, but you can. And when that happens, they really believe in you. They know you cared enough to help them do that. And that changes the whole relationship, I believe, of leadership. And then also it changed the way I looked at businesses and entrepreneurial opportunities. People would look at them and go, well, this is what we are. Well, no. What can we be? And it really starts to look to change the way you look at the world. And so that's what a potentialist is. You look at the world through the lens of potential, beginning with your own, and do everything in your power to live that.
That's such a powerful concept. I never really thought about it until you started talking about this, but I think I became a potentialist in my early 50s, believe it or
really?
not.
Wow.
It was one of my scribes had recommended a book to me, the self-development book, that kind of had that same message, like you could be anything that you want to be. And I realized at that time I had been living what I had been laid out for me as a successful life, as an academic physician, and all these things. And it opened up possibilities to me that ultimately led to me, really pursuing what I love and creating my own practice and the exciting things that evolved from there. So you being able to just tell people that they have that potential and they can live up to that is a powerful message.
I do believe it, and I know from the success I had in business that it came through that. It came through, and also in my life, that's been really what fueled me. It became my North Star. And that's what I'm always doing. And out of that evolved it's kind of like a motto, but it's really just a statement or an ethos, and that's that I'll do my best to be my best and leave the world and the people I meet a little better than I found them. And the little's important, so you don't let your ego get control. A little bit better. That's all we can do. And our best is the ultimate measure of success. When you lay your head down at night, you can only do your best. That life can't ask any more of you, and you can't ask any more of yourself.
Yeah.
And so if that becomes your measure, you'll feel successful.
Thinking about this from a longevity standpoint, I see a lot of patients who have had very successful careers. They've had financial success. And then they're in a transition phase, like they're looking for what's next. Listening to you, it sounds like that's never been a challenge for you because you've always had this North Star of your potential. Like you could easily look back and say, look at all the things I've done, and it's time to relax, and I can just look back on my laurels, rest on my laurels. But you have not done that. Is that a
No, it's absolutely true. And the second half, which came later, that little potentialist creed came early in my 30s, but later on in my 50s, I discovered the other half of it, which is there'll always be more to do until my last breath. But if this is my last, I'm complete.
Yeah. And
completeness is a different idea than death. It's a completely different idea, and for me that has always driven me. So I'll be swinging for the fences in some way as long as I can.
Yeah, and what a wonderful concept to emphasize. I really loved your first book, the Potentialist 1 series. It talked about what the next 30 years were, and you describe how change is going to be coming faster and faster and faster. Yet, you also paint a very hopeful picture. Why did you write that book?
Yeah. So every year, part of the way I keep myself grounded and directed and test am I living to my potential is every year. For me, I do it in January. Other people who've picked up the practice sometimes do it around their birthday. It doesn't matter. But I take a week, and during that week, I'll still do some things, but I mainly try to focus on who am I? Who am I? What am I doing? Am I living the life I want to live? And both for me, do I love my life? I should love it. But also that I'm using every talent I've got to give and all the energy I've got to give in a in a positive way. And so about 10 years ago, I realized, because I've always been a futurist and I track new developments, just something I pay attention to, and I've been doing that for 30 or 40 years, I began to realize that people didn't realize how profoundly the world's going to change and how fast. And part of this, by the way, was based in, I got to know and was a huge fan of a guy named Dr. Alvin Toffler, who wrote these probably the three of the greatest books on the future I've ever read in the 80s or 70s, 80s, 90s. Wrote them every 10 years. And one of the things that he predicted, and his whole books were about, is the accelerating pace of change. And it's been accelerating since the beginning of time, but the pace is picking up. And we're seeing the effect of that pace now. It creates anxiety, creates fear. People don't know what, but it's going to continue to accelerate. And we will have to learn how to adapt. Part of that is us learning not to see change and embrace it rather than fear it, because fear will just and pessimism will absolutely make sure you mess it up for yourself. But beyond that, we're going to get technology to help us. I mean, think about it. Your smartphone both accelerates your life, but it also helps you cope with the complexity of life and the speed of life. And AI is going to do the same thing. We will all have what I call an AI alter ego, which is an AI of us that helps us offload work and helps us sort through complexity of life, helps us understand things we couldn't understand otherwise. And that's going to be how we adapt to this complexity, is both changing our inner state and also changing the technology that we use to cope with it. And within 10 years, I'll absolutely predict today every single person will have one. It'll be an app on your phone, and it'll be and later probably it'll just be an earpiece, but it'll be how you manage complexity. And so you'll learn much, much faster, twice, 3 times, 4 times the rate at which you can learn today. And that's proven. And so learning faster, comprehending more, and having this buddy there to help you sort through the complexity of life is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned in there that we're all going to become superhumans.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what we would define, we're already superhumans compared to, 100 years ago, if you had told somebody, you know what, I can go anywhere in the world and not be lost and find where I'm going, they'd go, what? Yeah. Man, you're superhuman. So we already do it, but this is a whole different level where it is within the realm that within 20 years you'll go to sleep at night and tell your alter ego, when I wake up in the morning, I want to have completely digested the entire history of the Ottoman Empire.
Wow. That is an exciting future. But you also outlined very well in that book the challenges of this as well. The exciting things of increase in democratization will bring, but then how institutions are going to be de-emphasized as well. And it was just so interesting to me because so many of the things at this point when I'm reading your book, I'm looking at the world and seeing the chaos. I mean, part of it is the news media is filtering that to me, in a dramatic fashion, but there's just a lot of things going on where people can get really pessimistic about the future.
Absolutely.
And yet when I read your thing, I came out of that optimistic about the future.
Well, and it's pragmatic optimism. And the way I define pragmatic optimism, I was trained as a lawyer as well, is my case is better than yours.
There you go.
And if you're a pessimist, you had what I'd say back to a pessimist is, wait a minute, we came out as hunter-gatherers out of Africa 200,000 years ago or so. Look how far we've come. 100 years ago, 125 years ago, it was routine to take children to public executions. Now think about that. That wasn't that long ago. We're a lot better for that, and we'll get better. And so all the arguments there. Now, do we have huge challenges? Of course we do. But for example, that's also the value. One of the principles of wisdom is perspective, looking back. Well, Alvin Toffler wrote in 1970. He predicted exactly what's happening right now, which is as pace change accelerates, institutions can't change as fast as the people they serve. And so the people they serve start to go, because human beings as individuals, even though we're not great at it, we adapt a lot faster than organizations and institutions. And so after a while, we look around, well, what's going on with these guys? So now you read every poll that every single institution is less respected than it was 10 years ago. Did they suddenly go dumb on us? No. It's just that they couldn't keep up with the pace of change. So therein lies why these things will become versions 2.0 of what they are. You're already seeing it in retail. Retail is democratizing so fast and in ways we like and don't like. You know, the local stores don't have the stock they used to. We don't like that. On the other hand, we like when we can't find that little part we need for the light socket, we just order it from Amazon. So all of these things have a plus and a minus, and that's just part of reality.
One of the challenges in the way the world is evolving now is this increase in social isolation. You know, we talk about an epidemic of loneliness, and we know from a health standpoint that social isolation is a stronger predictor of death than smoking is. And so one of the things that I was really struck by, I want to read this direct quote from your book. You said, "Nothing about life will change more or in more surprising ways during the next few decades than relationships." Tell us why you're so optimistic about relationships when, at least from an outsider perspective, you might say, well, relationships are dead because of technology or dying because of technology.
Yeah, but it's an argument. But one of the things that's really valuable when you go back and study the arc of history and you watch developments come along is human beings initially always misuse their new technology. Always. We're like children. We'll go out and we'll mess with it. We'll do all the wrong things, and then we grow up and we figure it out. And so we are in the process of figuring out. We actually are more connected than we've ever been in our lives. I mean, think about it. Text, you can have, I got a lecture from my 6-year-old grandson once because I was telling him, why don't you guys get off your phone? There were 12 of them in the room, and they're all laying on my, in my house, and they're all laying on the floor. And I go, why aren't you guys talking to each other? And he says, no, Papa, you don't understand. We've all got 4 or 5 people in here. It's a party. And so sometimes we don't understand it, until later. And to give you an example, when the telephone first came out, a lot of people, because we lived in a rural area, and I was a little kid. Now, we had a telephone, but a lot of them didn't, and a lot of older people refused to get one. And their answer was, well, who's ever going to go visiting if you're going to talk on that dang thing? Well, we've adapted all right, and television, when television came out, there was this, there were stories after stories on the media about how it was ruining children.
Oh, yeah, the boob tube.
It doesn't dominate our life anymore. And so we'll grow up and we'll figure out we can be connected to people all over the world. We can connect to cultures now because our alter ego will speak 30 languages.
Wow.
Mine already does. And so we can have friends all over the world, and gamers already do that. Gamers have been forming relationships with people they don't know for 20 years. And they become lifelong friends.
I want to share this quick story. I was really blessed to get a demonstration of Ben's AI company, and his CEO, lovely man, Rob, was demonstrating it, and he was asking AI Ben, so this is Ben's alter ego, questions, and he started with talking about questions around the Potentialist, and then AI Ben starts talking, and Rob says, No. I'm a 16-year-old with 3 girlfriends, and I'm thinking about a football, And so then AI Ben starts talking, like at a level of a 16-year-old. And then he says, no, I'm actually a PhD I have a PhD in philosophy, and I want to know what you do, compares to Stoic philosophy. And AI Ben starts to answer, and real Ben, sitting right next to me, says, I have no idea what he's going to say.
True.
I mean, that's and it was brilliant. Like, what I know of you and Stoic philosophy, right. It's pretty much exactly what I would have thought you would have said.
Right. Yeah, and that's what you hope for, and that requires curation. So, like when you create an alter ego of yourself, it's not like day one, it's what you want it to be. You have to then teach it. You have to, like a little child, you have to curate its answers so that it answers the way you want it to, till it's like you. It's one of the best ways to understand AI. And I honestly don't think you ever really do understand it until you create one of yourself. It's like with the smartphone. You'd never have known how to use a smartphone using a manual.
Right.
That's why Steve Jobs didn't believe in them. He wanted it to be intuitive.
Just get on.
Same thing here. You got to use it to really understand it.
Yeah. Another thing that I really loved from your first book was you talked about the importance of having an entrepreneurial mindset as adapting to the future. And it really struck me, one, because I grew up in a system, healthcare, physicians, where that entrepreneurial mindset has really been squeezed out. Like now, right. 80% of physicians are employed, and generally, very burned out, unhappy, and I didn't realize how dissatisfied I was with my job until I became an entrepreneur, frankly. Can you talk more about why is becoming an entrepreneurial mindset going to be helpful for people in this future?
Yeah, it's first of all, I think companies are going to come and go a lot faster. We're going to go through many more jobs and careers over a longer life. Your work and longevity. We're going to live longer, and we're going to go through many, many more jobs and careers. And you're going to need to have that initiative to get out and retrain yourself, find new opportunities. Maybe it'll be in business for yourself. Maybe it'll just be a part-time gig until you get the next corporate job. But however it is, you're going to need to be organized that way, or internally organized around being opportunistic and being resilient and independent. The other part of it is corporations are going to change. They haven't figured it out yet, but they will change. They're going to have to be far more dynamic. The only reason we have a hierarchical system in organizations today is because before the first industrial revolution, there were no big organizations to speak of except the church and the military. And when they began to look around, they were going to build the first factories and real companies. They weren't going to build it around the church model, so they built it around the military. And so we got this military model, but does it make sense today? Not at all. It has all kind of things about it that don't work well. We all know. And I think the military has found the model, which is special forces. You build special teams to go get a special job done. You have some functional, but it's the functional everyday stuff's a fraction of what. And look how it really revitalized our military. With a lot fewer men, we're the strongest in the world, and because nobody wants SEALs Team 6 after you.
Right.
So I think that's the model for the military, something along that lines. And we will need internal. Just because you work for a company, you're going to still need to be more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant insight. Yeah. Your second book really surprised me. Like I just read the first book about a month before your second book came out. So I'm expecting, of course, a continuation of that. And it was completely changed gears. It absolutely brilliant, just really insightful. But, basically this pursuit of wisdom, that art of living well, which I really like. Tell me a little bit, if you don't mind going back and framing this, like Potentialist 1, what was that intention in your mind? Potentialist 2, what was that intention? And then what's on store for 3?
No, good, thank you. So Potentialist 1 was, first of all, to condense and give a summary of the future that people will actually read. There's tons of good books out there on the future, really sophisticated books. Nobody reads them because they're too dense and they're too long. And so I said, okay, I'm going to try to condense the future in 88 pages, or a third of the book. The rest of the book is, here's 7 wise things to do to get ready, because you're going into a new age, and if you'll do these 7 things, you'll be better prepared. You'll be prepared. The second book said, but how do you thrive? Who are going to be the people that define this new age? And there, it's potential, capturing or achieving our potential and becoming wise. And the argument is that information and knowledge has been the goal of parents and education for 600 years, 700 years, since we first started to believe people could read and get a quality public education. But we pretty well done that. It's in our pockets now. Information and knowledge is there. It's been democratized. Yeah. What's the next goal? And the next rational goal is to learn to use it well. So to live better ourselves, and to help all of us live better. And usually, when I speak to audiences, then they want to know what it is, and I'm happy to go through that. But what is wisdom? But I always say to them, I'll bet all of you, because at the end product is better decisions and throughout life. And I said, I'll bet all of you would agree wisdom is the highest human achievement. I'll bet you would all agree, yeah, that'd be great if people could be wiser and make better decisions. You just go, I can't do it. That's a pipe dream. Well, and I always remind them, only a few hundred years ago, the common belief was that you couldn't trust everyday people to own land. They couldn't be good stewards of the land. So only the kings, the royalty, and the church could own the land. Later, it was to read. Why would they need to read? We teach them everything we tell them everything they need to know. But we've done pretty well with that. Yeah. And then self-governance, that we could actually live without a king. That would have been a furious argument in the 1700s, late 1700s. But we've done quite well. So this is simply the next step, and it's actually an easier step than those were. Yeah. Because it's something we can all learn. We can all become wise. We can all reach our potential.
I will just say this: your second book is just incredible. Like the insights you have in it just made me so hopeful about my potential as well. You know, in gaining wisdom. I recognized some of the things in your book that I've already implemented, and they worked, and so that was
great, wonderful.
Gratifying. But also, there were things in there that you framed in ways that were really helpful for me to see things not as maybe a negative, but more of an opportunity. And I've always tried to maintain that mindset. Like, even when things are like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Okay, is it really? Where's the opportunity in this? One that stuck to me, and it was just so powerful, was the Law of Polarity.
Absolutely.
I just, oh my gosh, it took me from, I wish everybody could just get along, to realizing how valuable this. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a whole series of things in the development of wisdom and your potential that once you know them, you go, this happened to me. I went, how did I go through my parents raised me, good parents. How did I get that? Going to church, graduating from high school, going to college, getting a degree in college. Now I'm in law school, and I never knew this. Everybody in the world should know this. Law of Polarity is one of those. Mm-hmm. And if you understand the Law of Polarity, you'll understand the world in a way you never understood it before. And it's a little hard to summarize. It's also called the tension of the opposites. But it's an organizing principle of the universe, and there's good science behind it. And basically it says that when there is a tension between two things, and usually they're opposites, when there's a tension between those two things, if you hold that tension, and as that tension builds, it will cause a creative solution. And even solar systems have the principle, because you got gravity pulling, they're trying to spin out and disappear into space, and gravity's pulling them back together. Gravitational pull holds them there. So when you're trying to make a tough decision, you're trying to identify what those two polarities are, and by the way, they're not good and bad. They have to be. You recognize the value in both sides of the argument, just like a good judge would. And our whole legal system's built on this principle. And then what happens is, if you just hold it and you try to really concentrate on it, in time that creative solution will come. That's how our brains work. Literally, we need resistance to invent, create new ideas, to make the world better, to grow. So without tension in everything we do, we never grow. And so trying to create a perfect world that would have no tension would destroy it.
Yeah.
We need that resistance, and if you look at resistance in that way, then it's no longer, it's okay, what's the lesson here?
Yeah.
What can I learn?
You know, I'll ask you, to address something that I think is really common these days. But, one thing that is clear in the world today is that there's a lot of tension politically in the United States. And I was reading a biography on Churchill, and it was just really interesting how they describe his career in this tension between the liberals and the conservatives,
right.
And he was actually on both sides of that.
Right. Yeah.
But what would you say in that, using that law of polarity to people that are losing faith in like they're losing hope that there's a future that's positive because of the tension between political parties in the United States these days?
You should have lived in the 1600s when people who had been neighbors for centuries were killing each other, whether you're Catholic or Protestant.
Yeah.
This is not so bad.
Yeah.
And first of all, ask yourself, tension is not just in the United States, it's worldwide.
Sure is.
Why?
Yeah.
Why is that happening? Well, because something big is coming. We're about to go through another evolutionary leap, and this has always happened, and it's occurred over and over again, and it probably always will. And the tension gets tough. And what you hope is it never becomes violent. I mean, that's the trick.
Right.
Always keep it talking. Don't become violent. Hold on to it. Don't demonize. Nothing's accomplished when you demonize the opposition.
Right.
If politicians have the politicians obviously never had a good lesson on the law of polarity,
No.
because you must appreciate the argument in the other fellow's position to ever treat it fairly. And to find a creative solution.
Yeah.
So we'll get through this, and it'll be a better world.
Yeah, that's so hopeful. One of the things that I was really impressed with you've had all these accolades. You built multiple billion-dollar companies, and yet here you are, having accomplished all those things. And somewhere along the line, years ago, you said, I think this AI thing is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And not just interesting, potentially revolutionary. And you started a company of this several years ago, Ark Project.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Yeah. That is doing amazing work. What did you see in AI that it was an opportunity that you thought needed to be explored? And then tell us a little bit more about Ark Project and what's been accomplished in these 3 years.
Yeah, so first of all, I came up through tech. So at 16, I was a programmer, and when it was in early days of IT, and I came up through that route and built my first company was a little tech company. And came up through becoming a chief information officer, and then became a chief operating officer and a CEO. And so I've always had that tech orientation. And AI's been around a long time, about 40 years, but it wasn't totally very practical. About I was really turned on to it doing research when I found the story of a young AI programmer in Russia, a young woman, and she and a guy were good buddies. They were work buddies, and that's all they were. But they texted each other every morning, and they talked, and they walked to work together, and they were really close. And one day he was walking to work. She wasn't with him. He stepped off a curb at the wrong time, was killed. She was devastated. And so she recreated him from his texts and emails because she missed him so bad. Because he would text her every morning, "Hi, sweetheart, how you doing? Let's go have a great day." And so she did that. And I thought, wow, what if we could capture all of humanity? Like if everybody, it became a social norm that when we died, we recognized the story of our life has value in it. Every story, and I know that for a fact because I've interviewed hundreds of people. Every story has value. And so what if we captured all that? Imagine what that could reveal about cause and effect, about how you make a better life, about how you make better decisions. And right about that time, a little before, this image appeared in my mind of the Ark, the biblical Ark. And I went, that's what this is about.
Wow. Oh, that's a great story.
Let's create something that has the potential to capture. And then the other thing that drove it was I knew this was before ChatGPT came out. OpenAI knew existed, but we didn't know whether it was going to produce anything or when. But I knew one thing about big tech. They're wedded to that model of taking our data and through our searches, the Google model, and selling it and making money off of us. And it's a big money-making model. And I thought, that's not going to work. Not for medicine, for healthcare, not for education, not for most business applications where we need accuracy and we need consistency. Those models are not accurate. They're about 1/3 wrong because they're going against the entire internet. And when the more you go against, the more data, the more chances are it's going to be wrong. And then and they're not consistent. If you go out to U.S. take any of the models and ask the same question 3 times, you can get 3 different answers. And that doesn't work, again, for medicine, healthcare, and a lot of business applications. So I said, well, we're going to build something different. And so the people I was working with, we came up with this, what today is now recognized, called a bounded model. And in a bounded model, you don't go against the internet. You load only the data you want to do whatever you want to do. So if you're building a model of yourself, you don't need to go against the internet to know about you, right? If you're building a model on how to manage wounds, you just need the best medicine around managing wounds. And so now you can get accuracy, 99 to 100% accuracy compared to 60-something% on a ChatGPT. And you can be consistent. You can answer the same question. You know, if you want to say who wrote the Declaration of Independence, you want to say, well, you don't want to come off and say, well, I don't know a bunch of these guys, or so you get that with these bounded models. It's now been accepted. OpenAI within the last month, I think it was, said the future of AI is in bounded models. Wow. So I think we were on the right path.
What a brilliant insight. And I understand your company's been very successful already.
Yeah, we're doing well, and we've got which is really hard with startups, and particularly in AI, but we've created some very successful models, and people are very impressed with them, and I think we're just at the beginning. Yeah. So we're excited about particularly how it can change healthcare, and you and I have talked about that. We think we can radically improve physician productivity without them having to work harder. It's actually work less, and we can help patients be a lot better patients, do a lot more self-care, their own self-development and optimizing their health and working towards longevity. And then that interaction between the patient and the doctor is going to be much, much better, much more efficient. And I think ultimately we can even get it to where it's a cash on demand. Every time you interact with your patient, you're instantly paid. And
Wow.
Can you imagine eliminating all the claims, the EOBs and all that stuff?
Oh my God! Yeah, we have clapping in the background.
That's 15% of the cost of healthcare right there, and it doesn't make any of us happy. So,
well, when you think about the challenges of healthcare, and there are so many right now, and it's also 18-19% of our GDP.
Right.
Like there's just a lot of money being made, but most of that not getting results. We're not improving health. Frankly, healthcare is not mostly about health. And that was a big part of my evolution as a physician. Is I was trained and grew up on an episodic model where I see my patient periodically, face to face, one-on-one, in the office. Along the way, I learned, okay, well, wait, if my goals is the better health of my patients, this model doesn't work. I see them and I tell them what to do, and then they don't do it, and then then we visit about it again. And early on, admittedly and embarrassingly, I'll say I blamed them. Like, well, I told them what to do, they just didn't do it.
Right.
I had to learn that's not how people change. Right. And then when I was able to provide that more connected model with health coaching and a team-based approach, it's been exciting seeing transformative results in my patients. But to be able to do that at a higher level with all the data, like, the Oura Ring, I mean, how many of my patients will say, oh, I'll send you my Apple Health data? And I'm like, oh, please don't. Because I don't know what to, I don't have time. I don't have to have AI to be able to sort through all that and give us insights. That's an exciting future.
And that's exactly where we're headed. We're working on something. We have a working model now about a thing called optimal health, and that's what it does is take all of your medical records, all your wearables, your daily habits that you're willing to share, and it'll make an attempt to say, this is how you're doing. Here's where you could be, here's where you are, and here's what you need to do today if you want to improve your health. But then also that could be immediately available to your physician, because ultimately the whole thing is to help them be a really good patient, so that you've got everything you need to work with when they walk in and you see them.
Yeah, we're getting so much more data, but it's the interpretation of data that's really a challenge. A good example of this is genetic testing. I have select patients where I'm like, there may be a genetic thing here that we need to do. I'm a physician, I'm expert at this, but I get the report back and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to read through this whole thing. I mean, there's 99.9% of it I don't want to know. Right. Same thing with medical records, though, frankly. It's an ongoing joke in medicine, is that you ask for the records of a hospitalization and you get 75 pages of nurses' notes and, and vital signs. And you're like, can I get a summary here? Can I get a, what the heck happened here? Solving those problems is going to completely transform the industry.
And I believe they're I'm using the word relatively, but relatively easy to solve, because that's the power of what AI does. And I think the opportunity is there. It's achievable. What the bigger challenge is people are just hesitant to take the step. Even leaders, they're hesitant to say, okay, let's do this, or let's run a trial, or let's build a model. And I think it's because, I don't know, I think part of it is that they really don't get AI yet. And I don't think they will get AI until they build one of themselves. And then they'll understand how it works. They'll understand what it does and doesn't do well. But we know certain things that's incredibly powerful is, since I've been involved in technology, first of all, the data, the masses of data, it's almost unlimited, the amount of data, even in a bounded model that you can use. It's almost unlimited. The speed at which it can plow through that data and do analytics, and it does it unformatted. You just tell it what you want. Ask it a question. and it's predictive capabilities, all of those, and the ability to personalize. You just take those things and apply them to healthcare, and we ought to be just jumping up and down and going, oh my gosh, this is the best thing in the world, particularly in healthcare where we've got a shortage of clinicians. We don't have a choice. If we don't get after productivity of our clinicians right now, and that involves making the patients more productive, then we're going to end up with making choices about who's going to live and who's going to die,
right?
Because we can't get to them.
Yeah.
And that is a horrifying proposition for all of us that got into this business to save lives, not to lose them. So we need to get real about that. And people still, unfortunately, I think because we were all raised on disaster movies about the world being overpopulated, we have not accepted yet how fast the world is depopulating.
Right.
And we think, oh, well, it's going to be easy to fix. It is not. And there are some staggering numbers. I happen to love Italy and have friends there and go there every year. And I've watched it in Italy. I've watched it go from 1999 to today, and how it literally the Italian society we have known is collapsing. And once you get to 1.3 births per female, which China's already there, Brazil's there, Spain, Italy, you don't have enough women in the population to ever reverse it.
Wow.
Because you can't have enough babies.
Really?
And that's staggering. Also for the women in your audience, young women in your audience, I just heard this at a conference I was at. If you choose not, a lot of people put it off. If you choose not to have children until you're 30, the chances you'll have any is 50%.
Wow.
That's staggering.
I saw it, and I'm hesitant to bring these statistics up, but it because I may be off, but it was a poll or something, and analyzing people of childbearing age and how many of them are likely or certain not to have children, and how that has grown over time.
Dramatic.
And if I got it right, it was like 50% now are saying I'm not having children.
And of course, what that means is that you have to have 2.1 births per every female in a population to keep the population flat. Then imagine now if there's three kids, and one of them has none, one of them has one, and the other one has two. You've just dropped. And then the next generation, now you got a smaller number. That's why it occurs so fast.
Yeah.
And so what I usually ask, what I ask audiences to think about is we have two futures in front of us. One is, imagine, this is not very far away, 5-6 years from now. You have this beautiful new car out that you just bought, and it's a marvel of combination of technology, software, and mechanics, but you're having problems with it. It's the GPS isn't working right. There's something wrong in the electrical, and you call your dealer up and say, "Hey, I need to get my car in for the repair," and he says, "Okay, well that'll be 4 months," and you go, "What? What do you mean 4 months?" He said, "I'm sorry, those technicians take years to train. I can't get them. I don't have one." Or you call up your financial planner, and he says, "Well, I can see you in 3 months." That's where we're headed if we don't recognize this. Any job that takes a long time to train, has a lot of training involved. Of course, medicine's the top of the list.
Right.
And then it takes a long time to reach proficiency. Those are the jobs where we're going to run out of people first. And that's what makes society work. So that's one future. The other future is, imagine a future where everyone you depend on, your financial planner, your estate planner, your physicians, all of your physicians are at the top of their game. They're as good as anybody in there. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a rural area, they're at the top of their game. That's the other option. And the difference is how fast we apply AI.
That's exciting. Very hopeful message. If I may, I know we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to ask you this question, because one of, when I frame longevity for my patients, I talk about the 3 essentials, is that we want to avoid preventable disease and early death. We want to avoid becoming frail. We want to avoid cognitive decline. And then we talk about 10 actionable objectives to do that. Number 10 on that, avoiding cognitive decline, is having a longevity mindset. And I don't know if you've ever used that word before, or that phrase before, but when I met you, I'm like, you're the poster child for longevity mindset. Would you tell us what comes to mind when you think about what is a longevity mindset?
Yeah, well, I think for me, and I can, and it works for me. I hope it works for other people. It really is that we all should be humble, but we should also honor our gifts. We all have gifts, every single person, and we ought to use them. That's part of what I think we do. We should use them till the day we die, until we can't use them anymore. And we'll have to cut them back sometimes along the line, but it comes back to there'll always be more to do till that last breath. And by gosh, I'm going to do it. And I think if you do that, you're going to find your later years very joyful because when you discover your gifts and you think, yeah, I can make a difference, and I can make life, and it's enjoyable. I mean, it's enjoyable to give what you've got to give, and we can see it in the flowers and the trees around us. They're pushing to do their best till their last day, right? I love if we all live in the desert. There's nothing better than to walk in the desert and see a tree growing through a rock.
Yeah.
If that was a human, it'd go, what do you mean? I got stuck with a rock. Why wasn't I down in the soft ground?
Right.
But that meant that tree had more potential.
Yeah.
That tree was a tough tree.
Yeah.
And that's what we ought to be. We ought to be growing through that rock till the last moment.
So what's the age cutoff for becoming a potentialist?
There's none.
There is none.
There is none. You can start
Ben,
tomorrow.
thank you so much. What an enjoyable conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Todd. Thank you very much.
All content created by me and HealthspanMD is for general informational purposes only and is not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information is at the user's own risk and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Hi, I'm Dr. Hurst. We created HealthspanMD for people who are dissatisfied with healthcare. Common complaints about healthcare include difficult access, poor communication, rushed appointments, disease-focused or sick care with little interest in helping people get or stay healthy, and little to offer beyond a prescription or a procedure for optimizing health. This type of healthcare is unacceptable, but most aren't aware that they don't have to accept low-quality healthcare. HealthspanMD provides exceptional medical care. That means appointments when you need them, time to talk to your doctor, get your questions answered, understand your problems, and get a clear plan to achieving your health goals. But it also means a comprehensive, proactive approach to your health that goes beyond prescriptions and procedures. As a HealthspanMD patient, you will get our expert, physician-led team of doctors, health coaches, dietitians, exercise specialists, mental health, and other health professionals to help you take advantage of your best opportunities to prevent, treat, and even reverse disease. And you may be eligible to have our care model reimbursed by Medicare and some commercial insurance. If you're no longer willing to settle for low-quality health care, schedule an appointment at HealthspanMD to experience health care as it should be.